It's the 29th of the 4th, 2025. The time is 7 minutes past 8. There are very many F1 centric threads at which we need to pull leading into the Miami race weekend. Gonna get techier than techie things. Speaking of which, Checo Perez is in town according to the guys and girls over at Reddit who keep track of his private jet, the old PJ movements. We'll talk about that. Crofty responding to Maximilian Verstappen for some say seem to be a five-time champion. Max Verstappen as well is getting referenced by his old team principal, the one that they call Franz Tost 2015-16 setting, speaking glowingly as ever about his former charge. Mark Hughes has chimed in on George Russell and how that reflects upon Sir Lewis Hamilton, that George is doing so well in 2025. And that's about it. There are a couple of topics. We'll cover some things and we'll talk. It's Talk It Tuesday, do you know what I mean? So we've got to go back and forth. The exact thing that old media do not want us to do, and that of course is have good F1 conversations. How very dare they, do you know what I mean? Gatekeeping settings, us and them. No, we won't do that. This is as much about you guys as it is about me. It has to be a bloody conversation. Andre says Checo is done. Jams. Jody, good Lord, Michael. Ocon will probably be driving. Oh my gosh, Jody. Ocon already. Is that how we're getting that techie that quickly? Go on and let's talk about Checo Perez. For on Instagram, people are reporting that Checo Perez is in town for the Miami Grand Prix. That means only one thing, no, especially if Cadillac are doing this big grandiose launch, that Cadillac will have front and center of the mind as for their first priority in 2026, bringing back the Mexican Minister of Defense to their team. Now, it makes sense, of course, from a marketing standpoint, but this is the bloody conversation that we've been having for the past 12 months. Carlos Slim's sponsorship is material, and of course, commerciality and commercial minds have to think, because you can't race unless you have money. The late, great EJ's words, not mine. But yeah, and still, surely you've got to consider what somebody's bringing to the team, like, I don't know, a Checo Perez or a Herta, or, I don't know, a Hulk. Well, it's not going to be Hulkenberg anymore because he's already signed. But you got to think about what the level of performance that these guys are able to bring to the team. The question I'm asking, therefore, a non-rhetorical one, is whether Checo Perez's performance as at the 29th of the 4th, 2025, is commensurate with that of the money that he's bringing. Let me word it a different way. Does the money that Checo Perez is bringing into the team, is it more than offset by his level of underperformance? Maybe he jumps in that car like Antonio Perez Garibay, Checo's dad, has said. Maybe he jumps in that car and it's not an RB21 and he loves it again. He becomes Force India, Checo Perez, Racing Point, Checo Perez. Maybe that's the case. But if it's RB20 Checo Perez, the dude who couldn't get out of Q1 Checo Perez, then you'd argue that Cadillac F1 are potentially barking up the wrong tree. Speaking of barking up the wrong tree, George Russell has said of the drivers' market that it's moving at an abnormal pace, that drivers are getting signed early, and that what F1 teams, no principals, want to consider is the performance, that they're throwing contracts and big numbers out there without seeing what these drivers have to deliver. I would argue, King George Russell, that you've been a legend thus far this year, but that's nothing if not sour grapes, chap. You're the only one on the grid currently who doesn't have himself a bloody contract. Yeah, you've been good, but you know for a fact that Toto will drop kick you in the chest if he has a whiff of getting the signature of one Maximilian Verstappen. You know that, chap. How do you know that? Miami Grand Prix last year. Who do you think Toto was speaking to? Of course he was speaking to Max and Raymond Vermeulen and Nostradamus. Of course he was. What about during the summer break? Toto again having conversations with Max's team. What, you think that's all of a sudden just going to go away, King George, because you're performing well this year? We'll get onto Franz Tost shortly, but he tells you exactly the reason why Toto will drop in face one George Russell and or a Kimi Antonelli if it means sandwiching a Maximilian Verstappen into that car. Oh, and by the way, Mark Hughes has responded to a tweet. The legend that is Mark Hughes, one of the goatiest F1 minds to have ever goated. He said as follows: I think George is the fastest teammate on Twitter, by the way, or now known as X. I think that George is the fastest teammate that Lewis has had since Fernando El Plan Alonso. A great credit to late career Lewis that he was even on par with George. Oh, the humanity chat. Is this how we're defining the greatness of Sir Lewis Hamilton at the ripe old age of 40 years old? That he could get so close to George because of how fast he is tells you everything you need to know about Lewis. Behave yourself. And this is what perturbs me when people start talking about Sir Lewis in this way. Oh, give him grace. He's only just jumped in the Ferrari car. Yeah, the fact that he's like 5/10 or 6/10 in the race adrift of Charles Leclerc. I mean, he can't do impossible things. He's not the last there. But who are we talking about, chat? This is where people got to recalibrate the way in which they speak and the way that they address Sir Lewis Hamilton. If you saw that dude in 2007, all the way through to 2020, even in 2021, he was God tier when he was ready and when he'd had his Weetabix. If you've seen that dude in his pump, you can't talk about him this way. You can't couch the conversation in these terms. You can't be looking to give him a head start and give him all this grace unless F1, ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury, something has changed materially. Oh, and by the way, let's talk about Lando very quickly because I've put together some slides and you guys will like this. Lando Norris has given an interview. He's going to be the subject. Let me set the table as follows. Lando will be the gift that keeps giving as far as a plot line and or narrative in 2025. Why? Because he's nothing if not quick. Let me preface everything, all the slander and disparaging comments that I'm about to say with this. Lando is bloody quick, is he not? Super rapid. Lest we forget, in qualifying both race and sprint last year, what was he on Oscar Piastri? 20-4. And in my humble opinion, that's got to matter. That has to count for something because Oscar Piastri now is definitely not a slouch. But I would argue he wasn't a slouch in 2024 either. Andrew Benson writes, as far as the delta between the McLaren pair in qualifying average terms, 0.147. That's meaningful, chat. Even when you consider that was Oscar Piastri's what? Second season, his sophomore season. Now's only his third, but still he's a killer. And Lando Norris bested him in qualifying pace, absolute terms, to the tune of a 10.5 last year. That can only mean one thing as far as Lando Norris, that he's a quick peddler. Rapid fire. You'll recall Sandvoort, you'll recall Singapore. The dude is quality when he's had his Weetabix right. However, the ongoing question and topic of conversation will be whether he's as good in terms of his mental fortitude and his ability to handle pressure to overcome the multitudinous travails and errors that he's exhibited thus far in 2025, whether that level of mental fortitude is commensurate for his driving skill. I almost feel like the graph looks like this. Lando Norris driving skill here, ability to handle pressure way down here, out of shot even, or at least that's how it's proven in 2024 and now 2025. Many F1 aficionados speculated that this dude would be the favourite for the 2025 championship. You recall post-race Abu Dhabi, all of the Sky Sports broadcast team stood up, and to a man nearly, all of them were predicting that Lando was going to win the championship, or the drivers' variety in 2025. Well, look, there's a multifaceted causation pie. If indeed you harbour aspirations of winning championships, speed is only one of them. You've got to have that mental fortitude, the ability to perform under pressure, the ability to do the blinkered thing and become a silo, sack off what everybody else is saying. And that's what the F1 community are questioning of Lando Norris, whether he has that, whether his levels are set fair, sufficient therefore to win drivers' championships. And who knows, Look, everybody will look. It's a very low-hanging, lazy trope to say, well, Lando doesn't look or feel like a Michael Schumacher, nor does he behave like an Ayrton Senna, nor an Alain Prost, nor a Sir Lewis. in his pump and very different to his old mate Maximilian Verstappen. And that has to mean something. That matters, some say. Lando Norris argues that, listen, that doesn't matter. I'm going to be who I am and ultimately still win races and championships. And who is right is going to be the discourse going through. That runs through all of 2025. Let me tell you this. I'm going to play some clips for you because I was watching this guy on the race. The race's Ed Straw went to the Woking McLaren factory. And their HQ, their base. And he threw at Lando Norris a couple of questions. I'm going to play some of them for you because I think they're quite interesting, quite revealing as far as the psyche of Lando Norris and whether he can answer for some of those questions that are being levelled at him in 2025. Roll the clip.
A little bit more of a struggle this season is we made the car better, like 100%. We have the best car on the grid. But it might just be that little bit trickier for me to get those last hundreds out of, and that's just what I struggle with. But I can feel those things, and like we just touched on, I'm not happy unless I know I've kind of got everything out of it, whether that means I'm first or third or whatever it is. So this year it's been tiny things, and honestly it's very hard to put it into just the layman's terms of I'm struggling with this or that. It's just the underlying feeling that I've had with this car. Things just aren't flowing as naturally. And then when you have to drive in a manner which is a little bit less natural, even if you're adapting to things and you're trying hard to adapt to different scenarios and different way of driving, as soon as you have to maybe think in a slightly different way, that can cost you 200s, 300s, 400s. And when you're compromising things by 2, 3, 400s, that can be the difference between being on pole or third, And therefore I complain about those things, and I'm not happy with those things because I just want to be on pole and I want to get the most out of it. We want to get the most out of it. So in the end of the day, it's just my determination to win. It's just I'm not satisfied with not winning and not performing at the best. And then I'm critical of myself. I'm critical of how we work as a team. And that's why I come across the way I do.
So the question was asked of Lando. What are your processes, chap? The car's a little bit techier this season, a bit more difficult to drive as far as its instability at the rear. How are you going to handle that going forward? And Lando pedals out the exam answer. But the problem is, chap, I just don't believe him. I think he needs to understand, like Charles Leclerc has come to understand, that you can't drive every lap at 10 tenths because you will yeet it into the barrier. I watched an interview of modern day Jean Alesi the other day say that he had to reel his neck back in, not drive the car full send every single bloody lap, because that's why he was having so many accidents. It seems like Lando Norris, by dint of that, driving the car too quickly in combination with the rear instability, having to adapt his driving style, not being so overlappy as far as his throttle and brake inputs, and being more of a V-line driver as opposed to a geometric racing line, Donny. It feels like all of those combined are causing Lando Norris issues. He said all of a sudden that, yeah, we have the best car on the grid, whereas a couple of weeks ago it was like, well, Max Verstappen has a very dangerous RB21. Look how close he was. Like, make up your mind, Lando. It cannot be both. I would argue, I used to work with a chap who would always say progress over perfection. Cameron, you can't fester on these mistakes. And what comes across in Lando Norris's soliloquy there is that he still overthinks for this, that he still worries about what he's worrying about per se. Roll the second clip, Cameron.
It's sort of found itself in one of the few places where it's a little bit difficult for you,
yeah,
which is a really interesting challenge. Can you just describe, kind of in simple terms, where the I say struggle, sure, where the very slight struggle is that means that maybe you'll be just that few hundredths off in certain conditions on a certain track?
Well, I think that's what it is. It's not like I'm half a second off or often tenths off. We're talking about thousands and extracting the last hundreds or thousands out of a lap. And that can be the difference between me coming across like I'm annoyed and frustrated, or very happy. It can be hundreds or thousands of a second. So I think we are talking smaller things. I think when you're behind the wheel, everything is exaggerated. As soon as you feel like you've missed out on 300 or 400s on a corner, you feel like I've messed it up. What a terrible corner. But that can be the difference between me being on first or being fifth nowadays. That's how close it is.
Well, let me see you that, Lando Norris, and raise you this, chap. You say it's hundreds and thousands. Well, on average, as far as the qualifying sessions, including sprint races, 6 of them that we've had in 2025, Benson writes of the BBC that Piastri is leading you 4-2. Remember, for context, it was 20 Lando Norris, 4 Oscar Piastri over the entirety of last season, including sprints. Over the course of the 6 qualifying sessions that we've had thus far in 2025, Oscar Piastri has usurped that, flipped that advantage on its head. 4 Oscar Piastri plays 2 Lando Norris. And what's more concerning for Lando, seeing there he talks all this stuff about, oh well, it's not tenths, it's hundreds, thousands even, as far as my ability to adapt to the car. Again, some say that it's not the strongest of the species that survives Lando Norris, but the most adaptable to change. That is your lot. That's the challenge, the Rubik's Cube of the automotive pugilistic variety for which Lando needs to solve. Lando says it's 100th or 2. Well, Andrew Branson's done the calculation for us. He says on average the qualifying delta between Oscar and Lando thus far this season, 0.185. If I put on my maths cap for a second, rounding, that's 2 tenths. Lando Norris 2. So what are you talking about here, sir? He has to know that. He has to have access to the data. But this is the problem with Lando for me and for many in the F1 community. He does one of these, doesn't he? He averts his gaze away from a truth that doesn't fit his narrative. And per Alcoholics Anonymous, the way to solving for your issue is to first admit that you have one. Lando, I don't think, is at that first stage yet. He's saying all the right things, or the right things as he sees them, as he thinks they should be said. Whereas Oscar Piastri, if we're juxtaposing the respective McLaren drivers' approaches, Oscar Piastri said, listen, I had a couple of problems last year. Those, of course, were tyre management and race management. So too my qualifying pace was off. In the off-season, that's all that I was working on. Oscar Piastri's words, not mine, come through to 2025, and you can see the continuous improvement in the way that he's driving. Racemancraft or racecraft even on fleek, as it always has been for Oscar Piastri, but the consistency was here, is now here as far as pace in absolute terms, his ability to deliver a hot lap in qualifying in the paid sessions, and so too's race and tyre management were here, are now here. You could argue that in real time Lando Norris was here and is now here by dint of the pressure that's been applied to him by the robust one, OJ Piastri. Let me show you this as well. This is important, chat, because I think we're going to keep... Listen, Lando should go well at Miami. I say all of this to say this. He was brilliant last time round. It suits the car, and so too, the track suits Lando Norris as a driver. That doesn't mean to say, yet and still, that he won't struggle. It's a different circumstance. Oscar Piastri is a fire-breathing dragon of a peddler, now breathing down his neck. It's the expectation doom loop that Lando is going to need to solve for and address forthwith.
How easy is it to do that? And what's your process for it? Because obviously there's been a lot of talk about the two of you. How does it feel to
Let me set this up. This is important that I set it up. Tom Stollard, I think, Lando Norris's race engineer, sat alongside him. I think his name is Tom. Don't take that one to the bank. He was asked a question about performance as well. Compare and contrast the way that he answers the question. We'll talk. Roll the clip.
Here, the two of you. How does it feel to be in this position, knowing that if you do everything right, there's a pretty good chance that come Sunday you've won?
I mean, I think privileged. We should feel privileged that we have the opportunity to be in this position, and therefore, the responsibility now falls on our shoulders to try and do the best we possibly can. I think, we have to be careful not to be bogged down by what we're trying to achieve, and actually the focus remains whereby we just try and do the best we can at every single session, with every single decision, with every single action. And if you do those and you just put them together, then kind of the score will take care of itself. If you get bogged down by the end goal, goal or the target, then actually you can detract from what you're trying to do. So we try not to think about it in that sense. And in many senses, it doesn't matter if you're trying to not be last, if you're trying to be first. You're just trying to extract every last detail and every last bit from as many points as possible. My job often is not just to try and help Lando with those, but to try and help the other engineers around us to also achieve that.
So I don't know whether I'm prejudicing Lando Norris and the way in which he articulates. Maybe I am, and that's a bit of a nothing burger. You'll forgive me for doing that. But that for me is how continuous improvement and focusing even on processes as opposed to outcomes. That's what it sounds like. Now, I know he's a race engineer and a god tier F1 mind, of course, but there is a compare and contrast in the way that he expresses as versus Lando. And I think that's what concerns me. I wish almost that race engineer were in the car with that yellow helmet on of Lando Norris's, because I think, not that he'd be quick because he's not an F1 driver, but I think his approach, at the very least, the way it sounds and and feels, I think it would be better than Lando's. Lando almost wants to steal that approach from his race engineer and embed that with himself in a way that he engenders what that fella just said. Oh, and by the way, he said something that I think's quite important, emblematic of McLaren's approach. You heard him at the end saying what they want to do is make sure, so they're not looking to not finish last, that they want to finish first. Like, hang on. Is that a Freudian slip? Because lest we forget, McLaren over the past couple of races have been accused of playing defence. Like, sometimes you've got to put all your eggs in the victory basket now. Win 25 points. When they offered to pit stop Lando Norris before Oscar Piastri, failing to pull the undercut on one Maximilian Verstappen, it smacked of a team that's not invested in 25 points. Indeed, they're playing defence just like they did in 2025, a la Hungary, let's say, just like they did in Silverstone, again messing at the pit stops at the altar of being too bloody safe. McLaren will continue to seize defeats from the jaws of victory, lest they amend for this in real time. Carlos Rodriguez, you're a legend. Thank you for becoming a member. Go on then, let's talk about this Maximilian Verstappen stuff, because you lot have all been waiting for that. I understand. So, Franz Tost, I will contextualise as follows. The legend that is Franz Tost, one-time team principal of Toro Rosso, now currently sits on the board, I want to say, at Red Bull, potentially still has an affiliation at the very least. But then the context was as follows. Max Verstappen and Carlos Sainz in 2015 were brand new young hungry lions, but it was techier than techie things. Carlos Sainz Jr. had senior, Maximilian Verstappen had Jos Verstappen, and the two should never meet, right? Racing dads, I mean, it's always going to be difficult to manage for them, especially when they want different things. Carlos Sainz Jr., that's who Carlos Sainz wants to win. He wants him to be the priority. Maximilian Verstappen will of course be the priority of Jos Verstappen. There is a very famous story that goes something like this. Jos Verstappen was very angry when Max Verstappen, the very first year he was in that Toro Rosso, was left out late, let to go out and do his final hot lap at Monaco super late in the session. Too much pressure, too much circumstance, too much unnecessary rancor and pressure cooking of his son, Maximilian Verstappen. Max struggled that session and didn't put the lap in. I want to say that he yeeted into the barrier, but don't quote me on that. Jos Verstappen went to Helmut Marko and said, "What are you doing? You have potentially the next generation of driver in your midst. Bring him along then. Nurture him then." What I don't want to see, Jos said, is his career fail at the same altar, fall at the same hurdles as mine did. A difficult teammate, too much of a pressurised circumstance, asking too much too soon from him. Therefore, why your guys at Toro Rosso, why are we acting in a way that's not for Max Verstappen, not leaning towards him, not building the house of cards that is Toro Rosso in Max Verstappen's image? That's the question that Jos Verstappen asked of Helmut Marko. And Helmut Marko said, "You know what, chap? Jos Verstappen, Jostradamus, I think you are right. Let me have a word with team principal Franz Tost. To which Franz Tost responded, no, this isn't how we do it, Toro Rosso. We act in a way that's uniform across both sides of the garage. We're going to act in the way that's best for the team. Helmut Marko said, what are you talking about, chap? Do you not see who we've got in Max Verstappen? Don't fudge this up, because he will leave this team and Red Bull as a family unless you act in his best interest. Bring him along. You know what? Sack you off, Franz Tost. Team principal of Toro Rosso is what Helmut Marko said. Let me go and have a word with his pit crew. This is what Helmut Marko said to the Toro Rosso pit crew. You lot over this side of the grid on Max Verstappen's side are going to take your orders from me. Sack off what Franz Tost said. You take your orders from me. I'm Dr. Helmut Marko of Red Bull GmbH, consultant, head up the junior program. I have a direct line, not a dotted one, into Dietrich Mateschitz, CEO. So you take your orders from me. You act in the best interest of Maximilian Verstappen. Have you seen that dude at the Norris ring? Do you know what we're dealing with here? Do not fudge this up, therefore. So some of the pit crew said, all right, mate, chill out. All right, we'll do what you say, even though Franz Tost, the team principal, is saying something different, something diametrically opposed. And when they did that, Franz Tost said, you guys are out. You take your orders from me. Those bods were sacked, and Helmut Marko promptly rehired them to the big team at the Bulls that are red. That's the sort of thing that was going on then. Again, of course, at the altar of Maximilian Verstappen. But that tells you who Franz Tost is. A hard nose, but again, wasn't the biggest fan necessarily of acting or conducting the team's activities in the images of Max Verstappen. Here's what Franz Tost has said there, and it gets techie chat. You'll recall, let me tell you this as well for further context, because this is important. You'll recall, we've been saying a gazillion times, I feel like it was Benson on the Checkered Flag podcast many moons ago. Again, all F1 journals are created equally, but some are created more equal than others. Andrew Benson, many moons ago, many cycles ago, on the Checkered Flag podcast said that paddock insiders think that Max Verstappen as versus the other 19 on the grid is worth on average anywhere between 2 and 3 tenths. He didn't put a name on that bullet, but you can assume potentially the big dogs, Toto, the boy who cried wolf, Christian Horner will be on that. But that's me connecting the dots and doing a puff in here. Today we see reports where, per Planet F1, one of the God tieriest ones, Planet F1 report that Franz Tost says that Max Verstappen's quality is equal to 10 million euros of car development. Oh, the humanity. They always say about me, right, why are you always glazing Max Cameron? Oh, shut up about Max Cameron. This is the Max Verstappen channel. Well, the truth is this. He's the bloody story because everybody keeps talking about him because this is the generational driver on the grid, proven de facto as at the 29th of the 4th, 2025. Not me saying it. Forget what I say. I know nothing. I'm a B-spec F1 mind. But you listen to those who are more closely acquainted with the Maximilian Verstappen paradox. For some say soon to be 5-time champion. And this is what they say. Franz Tost said Verstappen can compensate for the deficiencies and multitudinous mechanical and aerodynamic travails of the RB21 because he is so damn good. He's so adaptable, so quick. Franz Tost says, quote, Max is simply 3 tenths faster per lap than anybody else, unquote. His words, not mine. So can you imagine? That's why Lance Stroll and Mercedes, Toto, the boy who cried wolf, are killing themselves with a view to get hold of this dude because he's the equaliser. There's no other driver on the grid as at April 2025 that can do what he can do. That's just the truth. Don't listen to what I'm saying. Listen to what they're saying. Those who are closer to the circumstance. Max, continues Franz Tost, has a feel for speed, an incredible overview, unbelievable vehicle control, and an incredible feel for a car, no matter which car he's driving. He would therefore get to grips with any Formula One car straight away. Of course, he would then fine-tune the car to best suit his driving style. Look, couple bits that we need to pull out there. First and foremost, incredible feel for the car. It's been said, chat, that if Max Verstappen drives over a crisp packet, he'll be able to tell you what brand and what flavour it is. That's the level of feedback that this dude has. If you're going to talk about balancing the car around and on the limits of adhesion, who better than Max Verstappen? Lewis could do it definitely back in the day. Bloody Nova 2018. Charles Leclerc's doing it now. Driving around the deficiencies of the unstable SF25 as far as its rear aspect. But bloody Nora, who better than Maximilian Verstappen to do it? And again, don't take what I'm saying as read. Listen to what Franz Tost is saying, who bloody team principled the fella. Oh, and it continues. It gets worse. He says you can't normally make a step like that with an upgrade. He says that Max Verstappen is worth anywhere up to 0.3, which is equal to millions and millions in terms of car development. What piece could you bring to a car in 2025 that's going to give you 0.3? It doesn't even work like that anymore. You will bring one bit and that will give you, I don't know, maybe half a tenth. Do you know what I mean? Maybe 100th. You'll bring another bit, that might give you another half. There's no one part, even a flexi wing or a mini DRS on the back, shout out to McLaren, there's no one part that you can bring to a car in this rule and reg spec that's going to give you 0.3. That's why they call Maximilian Verstappen the bloody equaliser. Franz Tost continues, quote, you can't normally make a step like that with an update unless you find a miracle part by chance. It normally takes a very long time for your car to make up 0.3 seconds per lap. Extrapolated over a year, that costs tens of millions at the very least. This is Franz Tost, one-time team principal of Toro Rosso, talking to F1Insider.com. He says, last year, Max did a test. Here we go. Here's where it gets techie chat. Are you ready for this? Because again, they can say what they want about me, but forget what I don't know. I know nothing, Jon Snow. Listen to what Franz Tost says. He says, this means that Max Verstappen can win races even if he's driving a tractor, of course, extending some poetic and creative license. Last year, Max did a test with Ferrari GT Racing and immediately was 2 seconds faster than the rest. Tells you the level of adaptability that this dude engenders, is embedded within him. He continues, Max is a very special driver who's superior to the others in terms of natural speed. He's so strong mentally also that he can realise his supernatural talent at the decisive moment. That's what makes him so superior. Nothing different to what we've said historically, chat, is it? That's what we've been saying. It's not just his bloody speed. Listen, maybe Charles Leclerc is nearly as quick, potentially as quick, maybe even a little bit quicker, but it's Max Verstappen's ability that separates him from the rest to draw out of himself the greatest out of himself, or the greatest portion of his talents in the times when he needs it most. Shout out Suzuka pole, shout out Monaco pole 2023. Do you know what I mean? Shout out 2021, as near as makes no difference every bloody race. Shout out Sochi 2021. That's who Maximilian Verstappen is. He says, we'll see which team. And again, here's where it gets techie. This is why Max is a conversation, because depending on what Red Bull do, that will influence what Max Verstappen does. We know already his contingencies, his parameters within which he said he'll see out his contract to 2028. And now, because of the RB21 and its multitudinous travails, the fact that it's a bad car, the fact that it can't turn, the fact that the aerodynamic efficiency is gonzo, the fact that it's no longer the RB19 and the most dominant car. In fact, some say it's probably the third or fourth quickest, being offset by Maximilian Verstappen's genius. Because of all of that, it's a very real thing that we're talking about, that dude could go to Aston Martin or Mercedes as soon as the summer break. Performance clause settings to that Franz Tost says, but first of all, Red Bull will need to bring a major update to Imola to decisively improve the car. Let's hope for Red Bull's sake that works. We'll see which team is left in the end. At the moment, he's still with Red Bull. Max Verstappen, he has a long-term contract here. Now, though, it depends, continues Tost, on whether he honours this contract or not. If he switches, there are various teams for him. Mercedes is the first choice, but Aston Martin could also be interested in him. Everyone will try to sign themselves on Maximilian Verstappen. But the question is whether Max will go. Max and his advisors will look closely at where the chances of success will be the greatest. No kidding, Sherlock. This is a conversation that's going to run. I'm telling you, particularly as we near the summer break. Word on the F1 curb is that if Maximilian Verstappen is not within the top 2 places on the drivers' standings as at the summer break, then he can null and void his contract with immediate effect. And all of those, Lawrence Stroll, bloody Toto the boy who cried wolf, they will all kill to sign themselves some Maximilian Verstappen. Of course they want to get into the Max Verstappen business when he can bring 2 to 3 tenths when he's ready. What are we doing here, chap? Go on then. Let me read out some of your questions around for Red Bull's wind tunnel correlation will be in. So Benzi, I was listening to somebody talking about that and they said it. Where did they say it? I think it's the Sky Sports F1 bods on the F1 show. Kurun Chandak, he was like, hang on, it doesn't affect racing bulls. So why is Christian Horner always talking? We listened to the clip a couple of days ago, didn't it? That Christian Horner's politicking Benzi. I don't know. I mean, they use the same wind tunnel, right? And if the racing bull engineers, guys and girls, are saying that they're unaffected by it, then maybe Christian Horner's just fighting for his life with a view to keep one Maximilian Verstappen. Pope San Miguel. If Max gets 8 world championships, I'll change my name to Pope San Miguel, mate. How real is that possibility, though, that he gets 8? I'm not sure Max hangs around to 8. Honestly, I feel like your level of glazing is actually disrespectful, says JP. You need to up the ante regarding Max Verstappen. I mean, listen. The honest truth, JP's truth value. Forget what I'm saying. Do you know what I mean? That's one opinion. But when you look at the landscape of F1 insiders, all of them are bloody saying the same thing. Listen to Windsor and the way that he talks about Max. And Windsor's a straight shooter if ever you've met one. Like, what are we going to do? And now we're talking about Franz Tost, dude who's more intimately aware and acquainted with Max Verstappen's not insubstantial talents than most. Like, what are we doing here? What are we doing? Stop glazing Max. Pope, you hear my response to your question already, to your assertion. It's not me glazing Max here. I'm just reciting what Franz Tost is saying. What do you want me to do here? Like, what are we doing, Pope San Miguel? You've got to you've got to speak truth and straight shoot each and every single time. And for the avoidance of doubt on this channel, anytime you come over here, that's what we'll do. Shoot straight. We will never ever sacrifice truth value nor objectivity at the altar of any cognitive dissonance worthy of the moniker. Safak, I don't know about Mercedes. Toto seems too fond of Kimi and said so many times that he's happy with George. Who's going to leave? Well, they'll sack off. Fernando Alonso has already said that he'll never drive with Max as near as makes no difference because he knows that Lawrence Stroll will bench him, put him as a cheeky ambassador or something of that ilk, and sandwich in that seat while Max. If he has a chance at Max, Safak, you know what time it is. The stakes are too high. Lawrence Stroll's already told you that when he gets passionate about something, he likes to win. He will throw millions, and something's going over that. Something at Aston is going on. All of the shares that have been bought recently and something. Normally, if past this prologue, when all of that financial and strategic movements going on around the entities and Aramco and Saudi Arabia want to get them. So there's too much chaos going on at Aston Martin. All of the bloody employees have just been offered voluntary severance and redundancy over Aston Martin cars. Something's going on there, chat. Maybe you might argue that Lawrence Stroll's looking to make space for $100 million a year shape in the soon to be 5-time champion, the one they call Max Emilian Verstappen. What are we doing here?